I am a child of MIT. Arriving as a freshman in 1956, I never left, except for 2 brief tours in Washington. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, under the final approach to McChord Air Force Base. I spent my childhood waving at planes and pilots. Now they wave at me. I came to MIT via winning first place in the Tacoma Science Fair. After my free trip to Cleveland on a train, accompanied by my chemistry teacher, Sister Albertine, I was approached by a local MIT alum with a PhD in civil engineering who said, "You should go to MIT." And I said, "Okay, where is that?" He helped with the various steps of my admissions, securing my financial aid through the efforts of the Seattle alumni. I could not have come to MIT without financial aid. Caltech did not accept women at that time, and the University of Chicago did not award me financial aid because they said, "You'll just get married." I arrived at MIT as one of 23 women in the freshman class. My freshman advisor said, "Why are you here?" I decided that I would worry about that question after I graduated, a Scarlett O'Hara tactic that I have often employed. My 1801 instructor, Professor Douglas, brought me cookies during the final. I took 1802 from Arthur Maddock, as did many of you. As I settled into MIT, it became fairly obvious from my early childhood experiences that I would choose aerospace engineering. As a faculty member, I was active in research, teaching, and faculty governance. Among other activities, I served as chair of the faculty, chair of the admissions committee, and most recently had my second tour as chair of the discipline committee. I have chaired innumerable ad hoc faculty committees responding to urgent policy issues. I am a strong believer in the uniqueness of the MIT undergraduate education. It has continually adapted from the rigid freshman academic program that I studied under to the current program with Europe and more flexible undergraduate degrees. But it remains a unique experience, which I would highly recommend to any potential student. I marvel at the uniqueness of MIT. Founded by William Barton Rogers, his unique vision, mens et manus, mind in hand, never ceases to amaze me as I contrast it with the then and the current visions of other educational institutions. It is an effective and adaptable formulation. As science and engineering have progressed, the vision has adapted to ensure its effectiveness in the new environments. I have actually referenced the work of William Barton Rogers in an important line of my own research on the structure and stability of vortex rings, which remains a source of fascination to fluid dynamicists to this day. In a paper published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society, I remarked, as early as 1858, William Barton Rogers, an American scientist and incidentally the founder of MIT, could write, "It has long been a familiar fact that explosions give rise to a ring which exhibits a rotation of each vertical element around the curved axis of the figure." He described his experiments in which he observed most of the now familiar features: the generation of a ring by an impulse applied across an orifice, the roll-up of the spiral vortex sheets, and the formation of the translating ring. I was obviously delighted to write these words in the introduction to my own paper. The linking of mind and hand truly makes MIT unique. Very important things happen at the interface between science and engineering and across all school boundaries. MIT is almost unique at having such strong schools which can simultaneously compete and cooperate, a very healthy and productive situation. One additional theme for which I raise MIT onto a pedestal is its articulation and allegiance to a fundamental set of core values. When I was Secretary of the Air Force, one of my important contributions was to articulate for the Air Force as a whole a set of core values by which the organization could carry out its mission with dignity and effectiveness. For the United States Air Force, these core values are integrity, service above self, and excellence in all we do. These values could and do, in fact, serve as core values for MIT as well. Of course, the notion of service before self has a different meaning in the military, where individuals put their lives on the line for this nation. But at MIT, I interpret it as a strong call to public service. Of course, educating our highly capable students with the unique education offered at MIT is in itself a strong form of public service. But MIT and its faculty go well beyond this. MIT faculty are on call to meet a variety of national needs, to develop leading-edge technologies, to advance knowledge in science and technology across a wide front, to serve as advisors to government agencies dealing with important national and international issues, and, on occasion, to take on important missions of full-time government service. As I have done, serving as Secretary of the United States Air Force and at an earlier time as Director of University Research for the U.S. Department of Transportation. I was also privileged to serve on the Space Shuttle Columbia Accident Investigation Board following the loss of Columbia. For me, the position of Secretary of the Air Force was a dream come true. Obviously, with my interest in flight, I wanted to, and did, fly every airplane in the Air Force inventory that had 2 seats. If someone else could take off and land, I could fly. I flew at supersonic speeds and flew the U-2 to an altitude of 70,000 feet. Now, unless there's some astronauts in the audience, I've been higher than any of you. I court-martialed generals and defended the Air Force budget. I started launch vehicle, satellite, and aircraft programs. The Aero Department at MIT has had a strong relationship with the United States Air Force. 2 faculty members, myself and Robert Siemens, have served as Secretary of the Air Force. I believe this is a unique record among universities. And General Jimmy Doolittle, of legendary fame, who launched bombers from aircraft carriers on a historic mission during the Second World War, was one of our first PhD recipients. He was also the first to demonstrate flight on instruments alone without visual input. Talk about the success of mens at Manus. But MIT's public service goes well beyond providing advice and assistance to the government. MIT has stood tall, has served as a model to the public and other universities, has spoken with an independent voice to articulate values in important national arenas. It is a leader amongst universities. MIT defended the principle of need-based financial aid all the way to the highest level, the United States Supreme Court. MIT developed the first policies for responding with fairness and effectiveness to allegations of scientific misconduct in research. MIT developed policies and procedures to respond to undue government intrusion into the openness of university research and education following the events of 9/11. MIT's policies on technology transfer and conflict of interest are a well-admired model for other universities. As we celebrate this 150th anniversary of the founding of MIT, we can rejoice in the uniqueness and effectiveness of the vision of William Barton Rogers. He saw an opportunity, he had the vision, he executed it, and we are all the beneficiaries. It is up to us to continue the quest.
And now we'll hear the MIT Wind Ensemble, conducted by Fred Harris, play The Infinite Corridor, a composition by Kirill Mackin.
We've heard from Susan Hockfield and other speakers about the boldness of William Barton Rogers' vision for MIT. And I'd like to point out something else that he did was bold. He put the T in MIT. Rogers saw a new world unfolding, one that needed a courageous new education, and one that also needed a brave new word, technology. My teacher and colleague, Leo Marx, has written about how the words machinery or useful arts or mechanical arts fell far short of conveying the complexity of the scientific and industrial landscapes that Rogers saw emerging. But technology seemed to capture the complex systems, the scientific knowledge, and the new kinds of human organizations along with the machines that were defining the modern world in Rogers' day. He did not invent the word. Some of that credit goes to Jacob Bigelow, one of MIT's earliest trustees. But Rogers T in MIT brought the word and the very idea of technology into the American imagination, where it still has a firm hold. And for decades, before they meant mobile phones and iPads or the gadget section of the local paper, technology and tech were synonymous with MIT. Today we're celebrating that new school and indeed the new idea. We're in conversation with MIT's past and with its future, with the mid-century Convocation in 1949, the centennial in 1961, and the bicentennial in 2061, which I've told Susan I won't be available to help organize. We're very fortunate today that several members of the community who attended the mid-century Convocation are with us. Among them, to our great delight, Tom Toohey, who as president of the class of 1949, escorted Mrs. Winston Churchill on that Convocation day. And Leo Baranek joins us today as well. He arranged the sound system for the event and helped look after Mr. Churchill. The best way I know to speak in this conversation is to tell a bit of my own history as a tribute to the many teachers and students I have found and still find at MIT. Some of them are close friends, others died before I was born. It is these countless relationships between teachers and students, students teaching the teachers, students going on to become teachers and having students of their own, that ultimately binds MIT together, both in the present day and across the generations. I first came to MIT in 1981, when my first teacher of engineering, my father, who joins us here today, was taking a summer course with the Industrial Liaison Program. I was 15 years old, and most of the time I spent sailing on the Charles River. But a few days I went to my father's classes and toured Nicholas Negroponte's Architecture Machine Group, which we now know as the Media Lab. For a kid who is obsessed with electronics and computers, needless to say, it was mind-blowing. My father is an engineer, and for him, MIT was always a city on a hill. 8 years later, I found myself in my first engineering job at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. My boss and mentor, Dr. Dana Yerger, had earned all his degrees at MIT. Working closely with him, building robots and operating them in the deep ocean, I began to appreciate this way of thinking that characterized MIT. Very technical and very creative. Sophisticated theory, ingeniously applied to exploring our world. It made me want to get a PhD, something I had never before considered. Woods Hole also introduced me to the world of telerobotics. As we learned how to explore the ocean with remote robots, we soon realized something profound was happening. These systems were changing what it meant to be a scientist, what it meant to be an explorer. I wanted to study those changes by combining my two passions in history and engineering. The arrows kept pointing me here. I had read Professor Merritt Rowe Smith's work on the history of American manufacturing, Professor Rosalind Williams on the cultural history of technology, as I mentioned, Professor Leo Marx on the American vision of the machine in the garden, and Professor now Dean Deborah Fitzgerald on technology and agriculture. All became my advisors and mentors and are close friends and colleagues today. Then, as now, MIT is the world leader in research on the social and human dimensions of technology. I came to MIT to pursue a PhD in the program in Science, Technology, and Society. The department started by President Jerry Wiesner and Provost Walter Rosenbluth, which I now head. I've also been fortunate to be part of the Engineering Systems Division and to receive the mentorship of Joel Moses and Dan Roos, Dan Hastings, and many others, and now to hold a faculty appointment in the Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics, where I co-advise graduate students with Sheila Widnall and co-teach a course on the moon landings with Professor Larry Young. I've learned a great deal from all of them. While writing my dissertation, I learned that the theory of telerobotics had been formulated by Professor Tom Sheridan, now Emeritus of Mechanical Engineering and Aeroastro. I immediately sought Tom out to be another one of my research advisors. I also found my ways to the writings of Professor Norbert Wiener of mathematics, who had passed away many years before, but whose cybernetics had been a great influence on Sheridan and many others. As I studied Wiener and then Jay Forrester, now emeritus at the Sloan School, and the Whirlwind computer, it became clear that MIT engineers from very early on had a vision of computers as control systems that interacted with humans and networks of humans in real time. These investigations led me still further back to electrical engineers Gordon Brown, who founded the Servo Mechanisms Laboratory in 1940, Harold Hazen, who wrote the first paper on the theory of servo mechanisms in 1934. They were students of Vannevar Bush, whose analog mechanical differential analyzer was MIT's first computation machine. I pored over the work of Bush, Hazen, Brown, and their colleagues, fellow graduate students Cecil Green, Frederick Terman, and Harold Doc Edgerton, all of them students in Bush labs in the 20s and 30s. After I joined the faculty, my students and I began developing the idea of remote exploration and figuring out how to study human history through ancient shipwrecks on the seafloor. We had to develop new theory and new techniques, and then new technologies to map and remotely excavate those shipwrecks with robotic vehicles. We founded a new field, deep ocean archaeology, and my former students are now its young leaders, Dr. Brendan Foley, Dr. Brian Bingham, Dr. Sarah Webster, Dr. Katie Croft. I learned a lot, and we all learned a lot in that, from Doc Edgerton's work. I never met Edgerton, but his student Marty Klein became a close mentor and friend. What was remarkable during those years was that nobody ever asked us what department this unusual work belonged in, or if we were allowed to be doing it. If it was innovative, interesting, and excellent, it fit in at MIT. Later, I turned my attention to the history of the lunar landings. Here again, MIT's vision of human-computer interaction had a huge impact on the world. I studied the work of Professor Richard Batten of AeroAstro, who developed the theory that guided us to the moon, and Eldon Hall, Don Iles, Bill Widnall, Margaret Hamilton, and the many other engineers and programmers at Doc Draper's instrumentation lab who built these systems and wrote the code. And of course, I studied these theses of MIT's moonwalker astronauts, Buzz Aldrin, Dave Scott, Charlie Duke, and Ed Mitchell, all of whom come back to campus regularly to teach our students. I was fortunate to get to know Bob Siemens in the last years of his life, as he also was happy to contribute his experiences to teaching our students. I pay tribute to all these people as teachers, some of whom have long passed on and some of whom are here today, not because the story is unique, but because I think it's quite typical. We can all trace intellectual lineages through this past 150 years in one way or another, and we extend those lineages every day as we teach our students. Whether we know it or not, we are all students of Jerry Wiesner. We are all students of Carl Compton. We are all students of Ellen Swallow Richards and Robert Robinson Taylor, of Richard Cockburn McLaurin and Nancy Hopkins, and countless others. And as scholars and creators of technology, that wondrous combination of people, machines, systems that knit our world together, we are all students of William Barton Rogers. When we think about MIT's future, we're always excited about the surprising new inventions that it is sure to bring. Yet we're also well aware that today's grand problems, few of them can be solved with new inventions alone. Indeed, in the 21st century, I see an MIT where the surprising and important inventions will also be new models, ideas, and insights from the humanities and social sciences. My wish for MIT on its 150th birthday is that we are able to teach future generations as effectively as the earlier generations have taught us, and that our students will believe that they too belong to technology in both the technical sense and the most human sense. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Let's take a few minutes to transport ourselves to the dawning of the Industrial Revolution. It is 1861, and the country is shifting from an agricultural and rural nation to one that is increasingly urban and technological. Our founders sought a model of higher education that would allow the United States to embrace the opportunities before it. They wanted rigor and relevance. They wanted to teach the tools that would prepare young people for the task ahead. Americans had to build bridges, create new chemicals, design factories and tools, and create processes for turning labor and raw materials into products. Advancing an industrial order and innovation to add value to effort had to be founded on a new science and its applications. Faculty and students would be learners and researchers and doers. Intellectual priorities had to be set based on usefulness in addressing the nation's challenges and nature's puzzles. Our founders intended, and I use the word intended, to create something new and different. The search for this model extended across the country and across the ocean to Europe. These were daunting challenges for a divided nation plunging into a civil war and economic dislocation. Our founders might have said they were creating an institution for the next century, and they were. They could not have foreseen science at the molecular level, the complexity of urban infrastructure, or imagined deep probes into the oceans and the brain, or the analysis of corporate management in a flat world. What they, in fact, did was create an institution that would be relevant beyond a time they could imagine. Indeed, we might say we are now being appreciated for the power of our educational and research model. We celebrate the triumph of intention and the enduring relevance of MIT. What they created made it possible for us today to do the ordinary work of excellence. What we celebrate as legacy, emerging nations around the globe today see as a model for national development that they want desperately to simulate. What are some of the founding values we celebrate today? I will mention just 3 closely related values. Our view is that education should empower students with the deep analytical tools that will allow them both the ability to use existing knowledge and to develop new insights, manipulate ideas and concepts, and design and frame alternative approaches and methods to bring to bear on important problems. We train our students to be skeptical, not cynical, but curious and clever, and willing to take risks. It is indeed the continued importance of this value that helps us understand the sheer volume of discoveries, enterprises, and solutions associated with so many MIT alumni and alumnae. With faculty and departments graced with deep excellence, our students get an excellent education that prepares them to lead in their disciplines, in their professions, and in their communities. Finally, I want to point to another MIT value, the recognition of excellence and merit. From the very beginning, talent, not legacy or economic privilege, was what MIT looked for in the students it admitted and the faculty it hired. Early in its history, MIT recognized that talent is distributed across the nations and not within ethnic, gender, or geographic boundaries we sometimes draw. We were not perfect. This took some time to be fully part of our practice. We have come to welcome talent from the whole human race and provide opportunity to a rising generation from whatever background, from farms and barrios, from big cities and sprawling suburbs, from Tennessee or Tokyo, China, Kenya, or Colombia. From these places and more, princes and paupers with talent have been welcomed here, have thrived here, and have validated the model we celebrate today. For them, we have been, and we still are, an engine of opportunity. In my remaining time, I want to draw a line, a 150-year line, from slavery to Robert Taylor, MIT's first black graduate in the class of 1892, to me. This short story incorporates two schools, MIT and the Williston School. Robert Taylor and I proudly share the legacy of both schools. The Williston School was in Wilmington, North Carolina. Williston was established in the months after the Civil War ended in 1865. It was created and thrived on intention. The original parents, teachers who were mostly missionaries, and a Massachusetts philanthropist for whom the school was named. They intended to give the best possible education to the children of the newly freed slaves. The education was what they understood to be the best, and they took time to care and to search. As the school matured, it featured the trades of the day and Latin. It offered bookkeeping and math. It offered science and civics, music and mechanics, commercial cooking and classics. We got mines at Manus. From the beginning, Williston prepared young men and women for leadership, grounded in excellent preparation, anchored by great teaching, and a purpose-driven culture in the school. Robert Taylor came to MIT in 1888, barely 23 years after MIT was established. Taylor thrived at MIT and went on to a distinguished career as an educator and an architect. Over the 100 years of its history, the Williston School will launch many other young people, including me, who felt empowered by the school and by its grounded hope. Now, there are hundreds of unlikely schools that prepared young people for MIT, but Williston was neither an accident nor a tradition. It was the product of intention, just as MIT was the product of intention. Now, I regret that such intention sometimes seems elusive today, when so many young people from humble places like Wilmington, North Carolina, still need engagement, the kind of engagement that Robert Taylor and I found in abundance. Robert Taylor came from a school that aimed high and achieved much. Taylor benefited from freedom's moment, that great faith at the end of slavery that education would not only counter ignorance, it would advance equality, prosperity, and humanity. At the same school, generations later, I benefited from another kind of urgency, the urgency of the Sputnik moment, that American commitment to reclaim technological and educational leadership when it appeared to be slipping away. The 150-year line I have drawn incorporates so much of who we are and so much of what makes me proud. I'm sure many in the audience can draw your own line from improbable circumstances and remote places to MIT and beyond. But our work is not done. Freedom's moment and the Sputnik moment will not work for this generation. We need a new moment that empowers us all to advance our young people and to do the work that secures America's future and theirs. MIT is more able than ever to play that role. Helping our citizens sharpen our edge is the challenge for the next century. Thank you very much.
And next we have the MIT Festival Jazz Ensemble, joined by the Symphony Orchestra, Wind Ensemble, Chamber Chorus, and Concert Choir with SQC Pie, Sesquicentennial Pie, composed by Mark Harvey.
The conductors and composers for Sesquicentennial Pie, are now taking a bow. And coming to the podium is Professor Lottie Ballin.
Up the river once remarked that the students are here for 4 years, the faculty is here for life, and the university is here forever. So it may seem that way up there, but MIT has not been here forever, and it has never been drowsy with the burden of its years. It was born alive and kicking a mere century and a half ago into a new world of human inquiry, seeking new goals, drawing on fresh, daring minds, serving new constituencies, and probing realms not dreamt of before. That was not, however, how it seemed when I made my first acquaintance with the Institute in 1957. My appointment was that of instructor in the Department of Economics and Social Science. But when I looked around in search of female faculty, I discovered there was exactly one woman on the MIT faculty, an assistant professor, the wife of a most distinguished full professor. Later on, at another university, she became renowned in her own right. So I took shelter up the river. Some 10 years or so later, having recovered from that first experience, I reappeared, this time in the Sloan School in a research position. Things had changed. By that time, 1969, there were 13 women faculty members, a number that doubled to 27 when 3 years later, I myself joined the faculty. By then also, there was a full-fledged School of Humanities and Social Science. But the Institute had no department of sociology, and the social parts of psychology were slowly drifting away. Perhaps this was by intelligent design, because as a result, the social sciences flourished, not in their own enclaves, but everywhere. They flourished at Sloan and have continued to thrive there, as well as in many other parts of the Institute. This depth in social science, plus the humanities and the arts that are so wonderfully evident today, superimposed on a broad science core, is why I feel that MIT provides the best liberal arts education in the country. And what happened to the women? I was part of a rapid increase of women faculty during the early 70s at MIT and other universities and at other venues such as law firms. After that initial surge, women faculty at MIT remained around 10% till the middle 90s. And then something interesting happened. A group of women scientists produced data showing unexpected inequities, and the president and the dean of science, atypically, but very much in the style of MIT, looked at the facts, accepted them, and responded. When this story became public in 1999, it galvanized universities all over the land, and it has now been decreed a moment of decision in MIT's history. Today, there are 217 women on the MIT faculty, 21% of the entire body. And as the recently released follow-up report makes clear, things really have changed. But some issues linger on. When a young woman faculty scientist reports that, and I quote, "I will say something and my postdocs will go and ask a male faculty member's opinion. I try to laugh it off, but wonder why they joined my lab if they were not going to take my advice." When things like that happen, we know we have not yet reached the goal we seek. So too, the report on faculty race and diversity, which came out in January. We learned from that document that we still do not talk easily or always truthfully about race, nor have we made our minority colleagues feel as valued as their work merits. As stated by one minority professor, race does matter. I am of the view that people should acknowledge that and deal with it rather than deny it or have different expectations. Contrary to what some may think, being colorblind is neither the solution nor the goal. Valuing all colors equally is both. We know now that this is not blatant discrimination, but unintentional biases held by all groups in the society. And we also know that if these biases are not self-consciously attended to, they perpetuate themselves and reproduce all the ways of interacting and evaluating that we have for so long taken for granted. A daunting challenge, even at MIT, where the best minds can be brought to bear. So there's still work to do to create the inclusive environment we want. And yet, as I look toward the future, I see continued progress and eventually a faculty whose diversity mirrors that of our students and our country, a situation that will enhance the excellence of MIT, still young, awake and kicking in the midst of its second century.
Next to speak will be Institute Professor Robert Langer of the Departments of Biological and Chemical Engineering.
Thank you very much. I wanted to share with you some of my experiences, first as an MIT graduate student and then as a faculty member here. My first exposure to MIT was as a graduate student in chemical engineering. I graduated in 1974, and some of you might remember that at that time, just like a few years ago, there was a serious gas shortage. But it was even worse in 1974. Not only did the price of gas go way, way up, but you had to wait in line at the gas station for hours to fill up your car. The consequence, though, of that was that if you were a young chemical engineer, you got a lot of job offers. In fact, nearly all of my MIT classmates in the 1970s joined oil companies. The oil companies had many openings, and that's really where the top-paying jobs in chemical engineering were at that time. And as for myself, I was fortunate. I got 20 job offers from oil companies. 4 actually from Exxon alone. I also got offers from Shell and Chevron and others. I think the only oil company I didn't get a job offer from was British Petroleum. They weren't interviewing at MIT, I don't think. But one of those interviews made quite an impression on me. I went to this interview at Exxon in Baton Rouge, and while I was there, one of the engineers said to me that if I could increase the yield of a particular petrochemical by just 0.01%, he said, wouldn't that be wonderful? It would be worth, so much money. And I remember just flying home to Boston that night thinking to myself that I really didn't want to do that. What did I want to do? Well, I had this dream from being an MIT student of wanting to use my background to improve people's lives. And I'd spent a lot of my time as a graduate student starting a high school for underprivileged kids and developing new chemistry and math curricula. And one day I saw an ad for an assistant professor position doing just that at a university in New York City. So I wrote them a letter, but they didn't write me back. But I liked that idea, so I found all the ads I could for assistant professor positions to develop chemistry curricula. And I wrote to all of them, but no one wrote me back. So that wasn't working so well, so I thought of other ways that I might be able to help people, and one of them I thought about was through health-related research. So I applied to a number of hospitals and medical schools. They didn't write back either. But then one day, one of the people in the lab I was at MIT said to me that I should write to Dr. Judah Folkman at Harvard Medical School. The person said to me that sometimes Dr. Folkman hired unusual people. He thought very highly of Dr. Folkman. I won't say what he thought about me. So I took what at the time seemed to all the engineering people I knew like a huge risk, and I began doing postdoctoral research at Boston Children's Hospital. It might seem more common today, but at that time, no chemical engineer had done postgraduate work in a surgery lab before. And I began working on 2 related problems. One, trying to discover the first substances that could stop cancer blood vessels from growing and thus hopefully stop cancer. And 2, to aid in that, to develop new kinds of plastics that might be able to slowly release these and other substances for a very long time in the body. Before I began working on this problem, however, no one had been able to develop ways to release these kinds of substances for a long time, and in fact, many scientists had told Dr. Folkman that this was impossible to do. In fact, I think the only thing I had really positive thing going for me was I just hadn't read all the literature telling you that it was impossible. So I actually spent 2 years working on this, and I actually found 200 different ways to get it to not work. But finally, I made the discovery that I could modify certain types of plastics and use them to slowly release those molecules. And we also used this approach to help find these first substances that could stop cancer blood vessels from growing and actually help stop cancer in some cases. Later on, we made discoveries in nanotechnology as well as how to create new tissues in the body and in various other areas as well. However, to get these and other inventions to the point where we could actually help patients and other people who wanted to use them wasn't easy. So one of the things I actually spent a lot of time doing was writing patents on this work. And with MIT's help, we licensed and sublicensed those patents to over 200 different companies, and I even helped start a number of companies with my students. I should say that when I started these companies, many scientists and other people actually looked down upon it. They thought it wasn't a very good thing for a professor to do licensing and start companies. But today, these companies have made many, many different products to treat patients with cancer, heart disease, many medical conditions, and actually even various consumer products. These companies have created thousands of jobs in Massachusetts and elsewhere. And I'm thrilled that I had the opportunity to be both a graduate student and a professor at MIT. I'm also thrilled that even though the path I took to reach this stage today wasn't straightforward, that it's been a journey that's enabled me to realize my dreams of the good that science and engineering can do for the world. If I had any advice, any words of wisdom that I've learned through the years at MIT for the young people in this audience, it would be to dream big dreams about how you can do things to help people and to improve the world. But there may be many times when you try to do something, when you make a new discovery, when you try to develop a new product, start a company, whatever your dream is, that people will tell you that it's impossible, that it will never work. But I think that's very rarely true. I think if you really believe in yourself, if you are persistent and work hard, there's very little that's truly impossible. Thank you.
And next we will hear the MIT Chamber Chorus and MIT Concert Choir perform Benediction, The Reason Why the World, composed by Peter Child, based on the text by Ralph Waldo Emerson from Nature.
The composer, Peter Child, is acknowledged. Susan Hockfield and John Reed are approaching the podium.
At this time, we will renew our commitment to the ideals and the values that since the time of William Barton Rogers have formed the unshakable foundations of MIT, a foundation that unites scientific theory with engineering practice, and that has given us our eloquent motto, mens et manus, or mind and hand.
To help us begin chartering the next century, please welcome our Presidents Emeriti, Dr. Paul Gray and Dr. Charles Vest.
Thank you. Thank you.
We recommit ourselves as a community as MIT embarks on its next 150 years to the mission of the Institute to advance knowledge and educate students in science, technology, and other areas of scholarship that will best serve the nation and the world in the 21st century and far beyond. The Institute is committed to generating, disseminating, and preserving knowledge, and to working with others to bring this knowledge to bear on the world's great challenges.
MIT is dedicated to providing its students with an education that combines rigorous study and the excitement of discovery with the support and intellectual stimulation of a diverse campus community. And we seek to develop in each member of the MIT community the ability and passion to work wisely, creatively, and effectively for the betterment of humankind. Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Convocation, April 10th, 2011, approved.
To help us chartering this next century, I'm going to invite representatives of the MIT community to join us as we, with mind and hand, formally endorse this renewal, this I charter. Chairman Reed. Now I will invite other signers to stand as a group and to come forward as I read your names. Raphael Reif, Provost.
He must be on the third hole. Look at that.
Eric Grimson, Chancellor.
We got to get Chuck Vest and Paul Gray up there.
Charles Vest, and then Paul Gray, President Emeriti. You can't don't rest your hand on the pad.
We should have practiced.
Thomas Koken, Chair of the Faculty.
They should have given us a tablet to practice on.
Dana Mead, Chairman Emeritus of the MIT Corporation.
You'd think you'd be able to press a button and it would appear.
Blanche Staten, Senior Associate Dean for Graduate Students, representing all MIT staff. Quill and parchment might have been easier. Ann Street, President of the MIT Alumni Association. Ulrich Ferner, President of the Graduate Student Council. Rajesh Modi, President of the Undergraduate Association. Thank you. And now a word from a great friend of MIT who was not able to join us, the Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Deval Patrick.
Congratulations on this momentous day. I apologize for not being able to join you in person, but I am deeply honored to participate in this celebration of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's first 150 years. On this day, in 1861, Governor John Andrew, whose portrait hangs in my office today, signed into law an act to incorporate the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, founding a school dedicated to the advancement, development, and practical application of science in connection with arts, agriculture, manufactures, and commerce. The university, wrote Governor Andrew, would be the beginning of a great plan looking to the long future of the Commonwealth. This was a radical idea at the time, a groundbreaking effort to leverage the best talents of our residents in partnership with government for the advancement of the greater community. It is my distinct honor and privilege to formally renew the charter that founded this great university. In 150 years, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has made profound contributions to this Commonwealth, to our nation, and to the body of human knowledge. MIT students and graduates have been at the forefront of advances in medical technology, manufacturing, and clean energy. Your engineers built the federal highway system. Your economists have charted our path to prosperity, and generations of innovators and entrepreneurs call MIT their alma mater. In 150 years, MIT graduates helped split the atom, moved man to the moon, and ushered in the age of innovation. The mission that this charter sets out and the contributions of MIT graduates are now more important than ever. MIT today is an economic engine in its own right and a major hub for global business. It remains at the center of the great plan for our Commonwealth established 150 years ago that we renew each day, and I look forward to seeing what the next century and a half has in store for all of us. Congratulations again, and above all, thank you.
And now we'll hear the MIT School Song, In Praise of MIT, originally composed by John Wilbur.
All of you to join us in the MIT School Song. Program has the music and the words. I want to just tell you how to come in at the right time. First, you're going to hear the MIT Jazz Choir sing the first verse. Then you're going to hear a kind of little fanfare from the band. Keep it in mind because it's going to be your get ready later on. And then you will hear us introduce the tune with the band, and there will be a second verse from the choir. We'll play some riffing choruses, just a few, and again, you'll hear that first little fanfare. Get ready. Fred Harris will give you a signal to stand, and we hope that you'll join us appropriately in the din that ensues. Thank you.
Die. our glasses high to pledge our love for thee. We join all those of days gone by in praise of MIT.
Rise indeed. The crowd is applauding.
Ladies
all of
and
the
gentlemen,
participants.
I think we've captured one of the key moments in the life of MIT. I thank you for being with us, and we look forward to our 200th.
And now Rambach, the MIT Senegalese Drum Ensemble, perform As We Recess. As the recession begins.
The distinguished guests are now leaving the podium. They'll be moving through the audience back towards a reception that will be held at the back of the convention center. If you're at home, we encourage you to raise a glass of your favorite beverage and say a toast to MIT.